folks get through the waiting room, and then we will kick off this session. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I know that folks are still finding their way through the waiting room, but I don't want to delay this any further. So welcome to day 3 of Food for All, day 3, session 2. Day 3 is designed to be a skills building day. So we're wanting to help citizen advocates, nonprofit folks, grassroots groups of folks learn how to have more effective conversations with their legislators, with their lawmakers. And so we had an amazing first session, and we're going to talk about that here more in just a moment, but I want to turn it over to Austin Sussman from 84 Agency. He's going to do just a 1-minute tech talk to help us smoothly roll through today's session. And if you guys have any tech difficulties during this session, please feel free to reach out to Austin or Cam, and they can help you through it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Austin from 84 Agency, and I am here to provide tech support and make sure everything moves smoothly today. So if you move your mouse over the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll see a toolbar. There you'll see your mute button, so make sure you are muted throughout the presentation unless you're actively being called on to ask a question. And make sure your video is turned off, which is that camera icon next to the mute button. You'll also see the chat there. So if you have a question at any point during the presentation, go ahead and ask it in the chat, and Spencer will try to get to it. Likewise, if you're joining us on Facebook Live, we do have someone monitoring those comments as well. So if you leave a question in the comments on Facebook Live, we will try to get to that as well. And if you have any tech questions, if you're having any difficulties with Zoom or can't figure out anything with Zoom, put that in the chat and address that to either myself or my colleague Cam, and we will help you out to the best of our ability. All right, Spencer, back to you.
Thank you, Austin. All right, so like I said, this is day 3, episode 2, if you will. So today's session is designed to learn how to make relationships with lawmakers in order to get champions for your cause, for your bill, for your project, right? So the first session this morning, for those of you who joined us at the 9:30 session, was a really good conversation about how to have good meetings with lawmakers, how to have really good, effective meetings. You know, what documentation do you need to bring with you? But I think a point that came up during that session multiple times was, you know, it's great that you're running into your lawmaker's office in the middle of session or before a council meeting, and you're saying, hey, I need you to do this for me. But what's really effective is if you build those relationships ahead of time, and that takes time. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. That being said, I want to roll right into some introductions, followed by, we have some predetermined questions to help get the juices going. And then what we're going to do is open it up to a live Q&A in the chat box, and we will invite anybody to turn off their mute and on their camera, or not turn your camera on if you're not into that, and go ahead and ask your question live. That way we can get some really great discussion and dialogue going. We had some amazing dialogue and discussion going in the first session this morning. So I expect nothing but amazingness today moving forward. So that being said, looks like we've lost one of our panelists. Hopefully we can get her back. But we're just going to sort of roll down the line and do some introductions. So Senator Pitsenbarger, will you tell us who you are, where you're from, the elected position you hold, how long you've held this position, and then an important question I think for everyone is, why did you run for office?
Well, thank you very much, Spencer, for having this forum today. I appreciate the invitation to be involved. My name is John Pitsenbarger. I am your current senator, one of two from the 11th Senatorial District. I am from Nicholas County, West Virginia, and I think most of all, most important, I'm a farmer. And I'm proud of that as I move forward into my other jobs. I was appointed by the governor when an opening came for the position this past fall, September of 2019, and have enjoyed serving as a senator for the district. Why I became involved is I felt that there wasn't enough agriculture representation within the legislature, and we need to understand that perspective. So I was able to give that input while I was there in the legislature, and I always enjoy helping people.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. Delegate Burton, on to you.
Hi, thank you, Spencer, for having this, and thank everybody for being here. I'm Delegate Eastep Burton, Amanda, if you know me. I represent the 36th district in the House of Delegates. So it's really a little bit of everywhere, but it's the hillside in Charleston, Edgewood, Oakwood Road, Greenbrier Street, that area. Alum Creek and Davis Creek out the corridor, and then it's all of the eastern Pinal County with a pocket in Tornado. It's a very gerrymandered district. I ran for office in 2018 because I had found myself, I was complacent. I was sitting here and griping and complaining all the time, and I didn't know what to do. I have 4 kids, and the public education was just on a downturn, which, it's gotten a little better, but I just really wanted to make a difference in my community and make sure that my kids had a West Virginia that they could love the way I did growing up. So, and then it turned into, I want all of our kids to have a West Virginia. I want us to enjoy West Virginia. So I ran for office and I got elected. It was my first term, and unfortunately I didn't get reelected this time. So.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. Councilmember Ketchum, are you able to, yep, there you are, I see ya.
Thank you so much, Spencer, for having me. My name's Councilmember Rosemary Ketchum. I represent Ward 3 here in the city of Wheeling, and I am a newly elected council member. I was elected in June of this past year, so I don't know what it's like to be a council member outside of coronavirus, but it's been really, really fun. I ran for office to address some of the more chronic issues that my community faces, including homelessness and substance use disorder. I've worked in community organizing for many years around those issues, including LGBTQ rights and racial justice. And so excited to bring that progressive voice to a place like Wheeling and to the state of West Virginia as a whole.
Great, thank you so much. I'm really excited about the individuals that we have joining us. Let's sort of dive into an icebreaker question. So I have made a number of interesting entrances in my life, all the way from tripping over a rug to tripping a delegate. There's like a theme of klutziness going on here, right? To tripping over my words. So just as a way to sort of, enter this conversation, hopefully with a little bit of humor, what is the most what's the funniest or the weirdest introduction that a constituent has made of themselves to you? And I think we will go ahead, maybe start with Rosemary.
Oh, my goodness, that is the question. Well, I have had some of the most interesting and perhaps most awkward moments with constituents, 99% loving and kind-hearted. I've had some constituents, walk up to me and ask me, they say, they introduce themselves and they say, "Hey, have you had the surgery yet?" And I go, "No, I don't, I don't know what that means." And so those are awkward ones. And then I've had other folks, particularly now, where they'll come up to me and they say, "Thank you for the work you're doing. I'm so excited. How do you feel?" And I say, "I feel great. Things are going really well." And they say, "Don't you dare listen to any of those folks online. They're so mean." And I go, "Oh, I don't, but thank you for letting me know." So there's a few of the ones that kind of stick out.
Great. Amanda.
I'm racking my brain and I can't think of anything that really stands out to me as being odd or funny. I must have met boring people. Not boring people, normal people. I don't think anybody's ever said anything crazy when they introduce themselves to me.
Okay. Senator Pitzenberger.
Well, one of my favorites would be more recent. I guess one of my youngest constituents is my great niece. And we've been trying to teach her lately to say uncle. And we've got her saying dunkle now. She says it with a D. And when we go places and I'm with her, she's always wanting everybody to know who I am. So she's going dunkle, dunkle, and pointing at me. So that's one of my favorites. Of course, there's always the things like Spencer said, when you trip or someone trips you. And over the years, there's been a lot of cool introductions, but still, that's my favorite right now. So I'm known as Dunkle.
Fantastic. All right. Okay, so diving into some more serious questions. The first question I have for everyone is, can you think of a time when you had a really great experience working with a constituent, a nonprofit, a community group on a bill or a project? And what made that collaboration so good? What elements, what values made that a really productive experience? So let's go in reverse order. Senator Pitzenberger, you want to go first this time?
Well, one of my favorite is from this past legislative session. It was Senate Bill 490. Make sure that's the right number. There's so many bills that we get to look at and work through. It's hard to remember all of them. I was able to work with the West Virginia Farm Bureau and other farm organizations with that bill. That's a bill that helped to establish penalties for folks that are entering or trespassing on farms or other agriculture facilities, so that intend harm. And they might be trying to destroy a crop to get a statement out, or they would leave a gate open and livestock would escape. And that bill got loaded up during session with a lot of things it shouldn't have been loaded up with. And we're able to work with other groups and push forward and get rid of all the fluff that was added to it to keep it where it was supposed to be. And I'm proud that it made it through both houses and the governor signed it and we got it into law, so that will help. It also establishes that the farmer can bring a suit against a person or organization that does things like that. So that's one I'm proud of because we want to keep our food supply safe.
Yeah, so Senator, can you talk just a moment about how you were able maybe to work with Farm Bureau on that bill?
Well, my experience in the past, I formerly served as the vice president of the Farm Bureau and am familiar with many folks there. And we were able to, the legislative rep came to me many times and we were able to say, hey, this is where it's headed. I could tell him from my perspective what I knew as it worked through committees and made it to the floor of the Senate. And they were able to tell me what they saw with other legislatures. And I was able to work with them to say, hey, Senator, whoever, this is important. This is why it's important. And we need to move it forward. And those are good relationships that the senators have with each other, as well as the legislative reps and individuals that are in the Farm Bureau and other farm organizations. So as we're progressing forward today, you need to build those relationships ahead of time.
Great, thank you. Delegate Eastep Burton, same question.
So for me, I worked with the West Virginia Grand families on foster care bill of rights and things like that. And then West Virginia Foster Adoptive Kinship Network. Okay, I'm sorry. My kid just was like, lunch, lunch, lunch. Open the drawer and make you something. Say hi. We're live. Okay. But working with those organizations to figure out, like, I'm not a foster parent. I'm not a foster child. I don't know what it's like. I don't know what issues they have. So working with those organizations to figure out what the needs were to write legislation that would improve their lives. So that was probably the most collaboration I had, other than the education bills that we worked on too. But it's just working together is a lot of fun too.
So just as a follow-up to that, can you maybe talk for a moment about what the back and forth looked like between the Grand Families program and yourself as you guys were developing the legislation?
Well, it's they actually came and presented to our committee, and they had a PowerPoint presentation and told us about their issues, what they do, what that organization does to support grandparents raising children. And the collaboration afterwards was what would benefit you the most, like just to sit down, talk, and then emails back and forth. That's pretty much how that we collaborated there.
Fantastic, thank you. Councilmember Ketchum.
Yeah, it's a great question. Recently, Wheeling became the first city in the state of West Virginia to declare racism as a public health crisis. And it was a resolution that I worked on in part with our local YWCA that seeks to empower women and end racism. And recognizing that racism is systemic and institutional, and often throughout many parts of our state, I thought it was really important that Wheeling take the step to really affirm that we are an inclusive and friendly city, and being able to collaborate with our YWCA was incredible, kind of the cherry on top.
Yeah, so sort of the same follow-up question. What did that back and forth relationship look like as you guys developed the resolution? And did they approach you with the policy?
So they actually had a petition put together with their own language. YWCAs nationwide, I think, have similar petitions. And so they already had a kind of framework, and the style of resolution exists in many other cities, and some states have actually passed it. So we had a lot of stuff to work with, and I work really closely with our YWCA. I'm a board member as well. And so I have that professional relationship with them. But it was a very smooth back and forth working with them, but also because it was such a sensitive issue, working with our other council members and our mayor to really strike the right tone so that the items that we included were actionable and realistic.
Great, thank you. So kind of getting down to brass tacks, right, of building this working relationship and moving things forward. My next question for you guys is, so when somebody comes to you and they say, Senator, I want you to sponsor this bill. Delegate, I want you to figure out how to get this bill on a committee agenda. Council member, we need more money in the city budget for X, Y, and Z. Okay. Somebody comes to you with these sort of scenarios. What is your preferred method of approach? How do you want people to come and talk to you about it? When do you want people to come and talk to you about it? And on the flip side, what is the most ineffective way to approach you about, getting you on board with a bill or a project? Amanda's feeding her kids lunch, so let's go in reverse again. Councilmember Ketchum.
Thank you. Again, I've been doing this work since June, so I don't have a whole wide scope of perspective, but I've learned a lot, particularly now that we're in COVID and we're social distancing. I'm very transparent, and I think accessibility is one of the most important things. So I've kind of blasted my cell phone number out to everyone who wants it. That's typically the best way to get a hold of me. I prefer, of course, my official email as a best mode of communication. And I really, I don't think people expect delegates and council members to be subject matter experts in specific issues. So for example, we had somebody reach out to our council about creating and initiating a tree board, a board that is tasked with kind of essentially ensuring that we have healthy trees throughout the city. I'm not an expert in horticulture or whatever it means to do, whatever the science of trees is. And so being able to rely on their expertise is critical. The worst way to get a hold of me is through Facebook Messenger, which I love the ability and accessibility, but some people get upset that I don't respond to their messages when it gets stuck in the message requests file and I just never see it. So if you're listening and you're a constituent, I love you, but email me or call me. That's the best way to get a hold of me.
So could you dig in, Rosemary, just a little bit, sort of like the approach? Do you want folks to would you want folks to send you an email, schedule a meeting? What are you really looking for in order to connect with someone?
Yeah, so email, again, is the best route of communication. And I love to actually hop on a Zoom call or a phone call as soon as possible. I just feel it's a better way to kind of gauge somebody's intentions and the tone of the conversation. And also, for me, it's a better way to understand how I can pull in other community partners to really make the best of a specific situation. So actually right now, the city of Wheeling received COVID funding, and last night we were able to pass $800,000 in COVID relief funding for some of our social services. And, I might not know exactly why or how COVID has impacted a specific social service agency. And so we need them to be able to tell us and provide us that narrative so that we know exactly what that impact looks like. And that, I think, can only happen if we're face-to-face, even virtually, in so many ways. So yeah, I think those are some of the best, most effective ways to approach a council member or a representative.
Great, thank you. Delegate Estep Burton, same question.
So, pre-COVID days, during the 60-day session, in person is the best way to communicate effectively, in my opinion. But email, Facebook messages are not the best way, because if we aren't friends on Facebook, it's going to go to a folder somewhere out there where I may or may not ever see it. But now, in COVID days, you almost have to pick up the phone and call me or email me to communicate, or do a Zoom, like Rosemary said. And I enjoy face-to-face. I love seeing people's faces. But in non-COVID days, showing up at the Capitol during the 60-day session is the most effective way to reach your senators and delegates. And it's 60 days of chaos. So we may or may not have time to talk to you at that moment either. So not everybody has the ability to come to the Capitol either. So I would just say, pick up the phone and call me. But don't call the office at the Capitol outside of the 60-day session, because we're not there. We don't get the calls. I hear a lot of people that don't live in the Charleston area say, that I've got 17 messages and they're all mad and get their messages.
Senator, you live in a more rural district. How does this change for you? How is this different?
Well, I want to echo what the delegate said. We are a part-time legislature, and when we're not there in Charleston during the 60-day session, lots of times we don't get those phone calls. So email is very important. We check our email more often than anything else. I'm a person who likes face-to-face contact, and this COVID has kept us all away from each other more, and which has made it harder for me personally, as well as constituents, I'm sure. Call. I love to hear a voice on the phone. I worked in radio, and I love to hear the voice, and I like to be able to talk to people if I can't see them face to face. Email is very important, as I mentioned. I do Facebook, and many people contact me there also. Something else too, during our 60-day legislative session, I learned myself that our time is very valuable and we are busy. I had a constituent stop by one day and trying to schedule in a meeting with us, and we were able to squeeze just a few minutes in before I had a committee meeting. And as I had to leave, my secretary told me later that the person said he didn't spend enough time with me. You got to realize when we got to go to these meetings, we got to go because they're scheduled and we've got to be there because there's a lot of issues. And as I also heard one of your, I think it was Rosemary, she said that, we're not experts in everything. So we have folks we depend on for information as we move forward. So when you come to see us or contact us, remember that. And sometimes we might even rely on you for the expert information. So be sure to know what you're talking about and have a good background on what you want to present to us.
Great, thank you so much. So in the Food and Farm Coalition world, we do work on some food security policy, but we've worked on a lot of agriculture policy. And over the years, I've developed relationships with a handful of delegates and senators that have been really important, right? In sponsoring bills, but not just sponsoring bills, helping bills move through the legislative process. But I recognize that I didn't just, I do what I did to Senator Pitzenberger this year, actually, which was to show up in his office and say, hey, I need your help. That's somewhat ill-advised, I think, but I've really developed relationships with some of these folks over the years. And so, what is the way, how would you guys recommend sort of building relationships over time? What does that look like? Does it look like inviting, in non-COVID times, inviting you to your group's meeting? Does it look like, visiting you outside of the district, in district? What does that look like? So let's cut the mold and see if Amanda wants to go first this time.
So for me, just inviting us to your events by all means and keeping us involved. Engaging on Facebook is a good way to stay in touch and get to know me and me to get to know you and develop relationships. But I think the important part is just stay in touch any way that you can. So it's going to look a little bit different for every individual constituent as to their preference and our availabilities. But Facebook would probably be the best way to remain active and stay in touch and get to know each other better and develop a relationship.
Great. Senator, I'm going to kick that question back to you.
Again, as the delegate said, invite us to events, especially in the off season when we have a little more time. And don't be upset if we can't make the event because lots of times our schedules won't permit. And I wanted to mention this in the last question, but I kind of let it slip my mind. When you have an issue that you bring before us, be sure to follow up. That's very important too, because sometimes things get swept to the side a little bit. And remind us so that we can give you updates too as we move forward. Don't just say, this is my issue and leave it in our hands and then be mad at us when things are over and something didn't happen. Be sure to follow up. And Spencer, I understand that you weren't able to meet me earlier being appointed. Things happened fast for me this past year and in session. So that's fine. I know who you were, and I don't know that you remember, but you and I served together on a committee a long time ago, once upon a time. But invite us to events. That's very important. Stay connected with us in the off season. Be sure to get some familiarity with us enough to say if we are in the area and you happen to see us at the grocery store, say, hey, Senator, do you remember me? Or Delegate, do you remember me? And don't be too aggressive too. Don't be disrespectful to us. Even if we weren't able to help you at the time in the past, that doesn't mean we won't in the future. And one thing during the legislative process I learned, you might want it done this year, but it don't always happen this year. Sometimes these things take time and they work over a longer period to get something done. And as you said, have your coalitions or organizations you belong to, have them get in touch with your senators and delegates, and even on the local level, your city representatives or your county representatives, and get to know them through your representatives as well as yourself.
Great, thank you. Rosemary.
Yeah, I echo, many of the sentiments of Amanda and John. I think, I'm a people person. I love going to events and talking to folks, and it's some of my favorite experiences to just be invited to something. And so I think that works very well. Something else that is important that John mentioned was coalition building. If I know that there is incredible support behind your ask or the request to bring up an issue, I'm much more likely to be willing to bring that up, because I know this is community-wide care. This is a community-wide effort, and that matters a whole lot to me. I love now being invited to Zoom events, even ones that are not in the professional scope. I think that also, as representatives and council members, we develop personal relationships with the folks that we work with, and it's great to build these friendships while working in the professional landscape as well. So consistency is really important when advocating for an issue, and I think for me, when I realize somebody is incredibly impassioned and is not going to leave me alone unless we take a meeting or we really dig in, I respect that. And that's something that makes me work a lot harder.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to pause just a moment and let our participants know we're getting down to sort of the end of the predetermined questions. So if folks have questions, they want to go ahead and start sticking them in the chat box so that we can work ourselves to them. We would love to take those questions. I would love to stop talking and hand the mic over to someone else, the proverbial mic over. So that's sort of everyone's warning. Start getting your questions together. So my penultimate predetermined question. So this is for Senator Pitsenbarger and Delegate Eastep Burton. So I've alluded to this, but in my work, things move quickly at the Capitol. Sometimes they move at a snail's pace, and sometimes they move really quickly. And I've had to stumble into somebody's office, and I'm actually really reliving this moment of stumbling into your office, Senator Pitsenbarger, and saying, "This bill is going awry. Please help me." We're actually sort of at a point where it might be too late. But stumbling in your office and asking for help. And it's a little bit of a different situation because you knew who I was, stumbling into your office, good or bad. But what's the difference between, kind of having a relationship and sort of knowing the person that's walking into your office versus the rando that you've never met before? What's the difference in sort of your response or your care or your abilities?
Well, I would say one thing, if it's someone you don't know, sometimes you need to do a little background after you talk to them to make sure they're reputable. There are folks that come into your office that might not be reputable, or they might not really know the subject as much as they need to. They just are very enthusiastic for this one bill. So as someone who hasn't set up a relationship with the delegate or senator or council person, be sure to come in, be respectful, tell them who you are, tell them what you're interested in, and say, this is very important to me or my organization, and give them a little time to get to know you, even during session, even if you stumble in, as Spencer said. Now, those who have set up relationships, you already know a little bit about them. You also know their background. You understand what they're after, and that helps to move things forward. And as a representative, I know maybe not all of them do, but if it's something that comes in front of me, I'll try to let them know the best I can, whether they're established relationship or whether they're somebody I haven't met before. I will say, it's not going to happen this time because, or we need to work on, especially during the 60-day session. If you come to us at that point, it's really too late. You need to be contacting your senators and delegates right now, November, December, before and as things are getting ready, because there's a lot of work behind the scenes that gets the legislative session ready. And with this year and COVID coming up, we don't ourselves know exactly what's going to happen with the setup of the legislature and how things are going to work there and how much remote we're going to be and how much we're going to be there. I will say this, I'm not going to be there, as the delegate said. My term ends at the end of December. So you need to establish relationships with the new folks that are coming in. So, and as being involved in agriculture, I knew who Spencer was and some of the other organizations, which helps. And we need to have people as your senators and delegates, and we do, that we know that I can say, hey, who was this person? Do you know them? And we can get some information there also.
You bring up a really interesting point. I guess I hadn't thought about it. So if you're able to tell us, do senators or delegates, do they talk about the folks that have stumbled into their offices? Not in like a gossipy way, but do you ask each other about people?
We do. A senator or someone I know, or a delegate for that matter, I'll say, do you know such and such? Is their cause valid? Or is this a valid concern? Because there are things that come before the legislature that aren't as valid as some people think they are. And there are also ways to help people that come into your office that's not with legislation. They might not know all the rules, or they might not know something that's already been passed. I've had myself and my assistant able to call people within a county or another department, and they were able to help them without passing legislative action, and they did not realize that. So there's other ways to help besides just the bills that come out of the legislature.
You know, I think that you bring up a really good point. Something maybe we can get back to after we let Amanda answer this question. Amanda, do you want to go ahead and answer that?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's really important to remember that the House of Delegates do not have assistants or secretaries or anything like that. So people think that they're going to call my secretary and get on my calendar, and it's not that easy. But for me, there are a lot of lobbyists in the Capitol at any given time during that session. I didn't know most of them when I first got there. So yes, we do ask each other, is this person legit? You know, or who are they with? What are they doing? But that's one of the things, when you walk into my office and I don't know you, I want to know who you are and who you represent, like what you're here to talk about. A lot of times people will come in my office and chat, and never get to the point until it's like 30 minutes later, and just be direct and be respectful of our time and during the 60 days. Outside of the 60-day session, you know, take up as much time as you need. But when we're in this session, most of the time we're shoving like whatever food we can find in our face just to have a bite to eat that day. So, but yeah, getting to know each other and just be direct and to the point.
Great. All right. So, Council Member Ketchum, so you represent local decision making, right? How is it different for you living in and legislating in the communities that you serve and that you've lived in for many years? You know, I imagine a situation where you've got maybe a local police officer knocking on your door at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, asking about money in a city budget. What advice do you have for citizens who have issues and want to approach not just you, but your local lawmakers in general? What advice do you have for them?
It's a great question. I'm privileged to have experience on both sides. Before running for office, I worked as a community organizer, and I was the politician's worst enemy, knocking on their door and asking them to take up legislation and lobbying for specific issues. So I have a soft place in my heart for organizers and people who come and knock on my door at 6 a.m. Although that doesn't happen in COVID. I think honestly, one of my favorite things about being a municipal leader, being a council member, is the accessibility. I am getting my gas and somebody hails me down and asks me about, money in the budget for our public transit system, or, I'm, shopping at the grocery store and somebody hails me down to talk to me about our resolution declaring racism as a public health crisis. And, while some people might see that as a burden or inconvenient, I absolutely love it. It's my favorite part. And I think that, as much as we are, folks who run for office to pass ordinances and legislation, in many ways, we are teachers. as representatives and council members. We are there to help people understand what the system looks like on the inside. I find that a lot of people are incredibly frustrated in politics, particularly here in West Virginia, and that regardless of whether you represent, 200,000 people or 2,000 people. And for me, I've had a lot of fun in helping people, and I take the responsibility very seriously, helping people understand how the process works, and that politicians are not evil people, even though it's often used as a pejorative word, that we're really trying to do the best things we can for our community. And I hope that we're able to see that kind of political shift toward more compassionate governance. And I think we have the opportunity to do that here in West Virginia.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so I'm gonna go to the chat box. So again, if folks have questions that they'd like to ask, we're taking those now. James Russell, I want to invite you to turn off your mute button and ask a question.
You know that's very hard for me, right? Why would you put me on the spot? I would rather type. My question is in time of COVID, and I am not, Spencer knows I'm not a very social person. I'm awkward at talking in large groups or new people. So my question is, in the time of COVID, is email or social introductions acceptable? To say, hey, this is who I am. I want to be on your radar. I want to be, I want to be there. I want to be noticed. Are these introduction types acceptable?
Does anybody feel like they'd like to go first?
I will. I think it's absolutely acceptable, especially in times of COVID. It's the best way to get to know each other at this point, in my opinion.
And am I on? Okay. I absolutely agree with that also, because we cannot always get face to face like we like to many times. So absolutely, that's a good way to start the conversation.
I think also, while for me, Facebook Messenger or Instagram, I do, people reach out to me on those platforms. I actually love when people are able to text me, and I give out my cell phone number to folks, and if they are able to text me, I will see it for sure. And it's just much easier for me to respond that way. So yeah, those are preferable avenues.
Great. I'm just scrolling back through. Josh Lohnes, you had a question about a bill number. Did you want to unmute yourself and ask that? Maybe we'll give him just a moment. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have other chat questions at the moment, but we'll continue to take those. I did source some questions from some folks ahead of time, just in case this popped up. But one of the questions was, if I don't have an issue at the moment that I want you to take action on, but I might have an issue in the future, and I feel like I should just introduce myself. What does that look like, and how do I do it in a way that doesn't feel like it's wasting your time as a lawmaker?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
I would say go with James Russell's answers there just a moment ago that we give. Be sure to shoot us an email. Be sure to contact us on Facebook. If you have a phone number or a text number, be sure to give us a call or a text and say, hey, I'm Joe Smith. I'm with whatever coalition it is. Or if you're not with something, be sure to let us know that. Say, I have concerns about family issues, or I have concerns about teaching issues, or whatever it might be. And be sure to let us know that we'll be talking again in the future. So it's a good way to open up the conversation early on. That's one thing I had on my list here. Be sure to contact us. Let us know you're out there. We work for you. We really do. Our time's valuable for a lot of reasons. I know that the delegates had to work on lunch between, and we have other things in lives and things we do too. So be considerate with our time, but let us know you're out there. I think that's a good thing.
Does anybody else have a follow-up to that?
I do. And if I've made it sound like you're wasting our time, you're definitely not wasting our time ever. Like the question said, without wasting your time. Even outside of that 60-day session, we have a lot more flexibility to be available.
That's true.
And I don't want any constituent to ever feel like they're wasting our time. If you have a representative and you feel like you're wasting their time, then that's an issue. But anyway, I mean, when I first got elected, a lot of lobbyists and other organizations would call me and just invite me to lunch. Of course, it was pre-COVID and you could just go sit down with a stranger and have lunch without any issues. But just get to know each other, ask, if you've got 5 minutes for an introduction on the phone. Like Rosemary said, we give our cell phone numbers out like crazy because our office numbers at the Capitol, we're not there to take those calls most of the time. So we want you to text us. We want you to call us. We want you to get in touch with us, but just be patient with us during the 60-day session if you can't get a hold of us. Remember that we're human too. A lot of people think that we're superhumans, but we're not.
Yeah, I agree. I think that oftentimes people feel as if they don't have a specific request, then they shouldn't reach out or they shouldn't contact us. I actually think that's the opposite. Politics is about the relationships and trust building. And so if a person is able to reach out to us and say, hey, I don't have a specific ask, but I like the work you're doing and I'd love to work with you in the future, that's a really great way to start a relationship and to start trust building early and to cultivate that so that when you do have a specific ask, we've already, kind of built that introduction, and so it moves a lot smoother.
Fantastic, thank you. James sort of has a follow-up question. I will help him not turn on his mute button because I know he doesn't like it, or turn off his mute button. So he wants to know, so we know that on the state legislative website that there is contact information for the senators and the delegates, and presumably the same for the city of Wheeling. Other than that, what is the best way to find contact information for local or for representatives?
I mean, outside of wvlegislature.gov, I don't know of a different avenue to find contact information publicly that's out there. A lot of the candidates have their own websites and whatnot with their contact information on it, but I would just say the legislature's website is the best place to go for contact information, and my cell phone's on there.
I agree with that, but you can always do a search on Facebook because we have Facebook sites up from time to time. So look for us there and contact your local political parties. A lot of them have a contact for us that they can pass on to you so that you can contact us.
Rosemary, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, our contact information, our official emails for City Council are on our website at wheelingwv.org. And I'm pretty sure most, if not all cities have their own website and should list that contact information.
Thank you. Josh Lohnes, you have a question. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah, my question is for Rosemary, but also others can respond as well. I think that interaction between local level policymaking as kind of cracking open issues for our state representative bodies to look at. And then because this is a conference on hunger and food access, I've been thinking a lot about right to food. And in Maine, local councils have adopted language around food sovereignty, right to food that's now percolated up to their state house. And Yeah, just wondering if you all could speak to that, and from, the perspective of the senator and delegate, what local policy does to influence state policy.
I think that's a genius question and observation, Joshua. And I completely agree. I think that municipalities often serve as laboratories or agents of change for new and thoughtful, progressive policies. And it's one of the reasons I ran for city council, because I believe that politics exists at the grassroots, and there isn't anything more grassroots than being on city council. And so that's one of the reasons I worked to pass racism as a public health crisis, because I realized that this could be a snowball. And the goal is for a formal resolution to pass the governor's desk eventually. And I see that mirrored. My inspiration were the non-discrimination ordinances that passed throughout the state of West Virginia. Municipalities did not wait on Charleston to pick up statewide non-discrimination ordinances. They decided to do it themselves. Charleston, Morgantown, Wheeling, Martinsburg, so many others. And hopefully, eventually, we will see statewide non-discrimination passed. We have bipartisan support, but that was the inspiration for not me just running for office, but passing these municipal resolutions. And I think there's absolutely opportunity to pass resolutions for food security. We have an amazing organization, Grow Ohio Valley, here in Wheeling, that's working on food security. And I think that municipalities have an obligation to play a part in securing that for our communities.
I agree. I agree with Rosemary. I was just thinking before she said it, grassroots, that's very important. Organizations I've been involved in the past, that's where it all starts, on the local level, and it moves up from there lots of times. And I like to see things moving up instead of moving down, because sometimes that is not a good thing. Being involved in agriculture, I understand your question. And one thing we haven't mentioned this morning are food deserts. That's something a lot of us here know about, but a lot of folks in Charleston, your representatives might not understand what a food desert is. So when you inform us as your representatives, you need to inform us of these things and let us know how they affect you, or affect a community, or affect a state for that matter, or even across the nation as it might be. So that's very important as we move forward.
And I'll just echo what everyone else has said too. It's absolutely, I think it's wonderful to start at the local level and build up for legislation. And Rosemary pinned it on the nail on the head. Donkey, whatever, when she said the non-discrimination ordinances. I mean, that's a prime example, and hopefully our state can pass that as well.
So another question, well, actually, let's double back on a question the senator sort of initiated in my brain was, can you guys speak to, so, maybe I'm coming to you and I'm not asking for a policy change or a project necessarily, or something to be in the budget. What are some things that local representatives or state representatives can help constituents with other than passing policy? And Senator, maybe I'm going to kick it to you first, because you started this.
And that's fine. I was thinking of that. Could you repeat that again before we start? Because I didn't catch all of it. All some audio there.
Yeah, sure. What are some other things that representatives can help constituents with that are not policies or not legislation?
Well, too, from my perspective is there are folks that I can contact within the communities or the areas to say, let's say someone has come and said, this is very important because, and I'm not familiar with it. After you've introduced yourself to me and we get a little bit of a rapport, I might depend on you for information. I've done that in the past on some issues. So I can call the person and say, hey, there's some interest in whatever it might be, nursing, which I don't know a lot about, or the medical field, or even for that matter, education or whatever it might be. There are folks we depend on for that. So as you introduce yourselves to us, we might depend on you for help in the future. And two, as I mentioned, it's good for us to be able to know folks within transportation or other departments, the agriculture or education or whatever it might be, so that if there is a concern, that we don't have to go through the legislative process of a bill, we can contact them to help our constituents.
Fantastic. Are there follow-ups from Amanda or Rosemary?
I mean, I will echo what he said, but I'm trying to think of how I want to say this. We're helpers. That's why we ran for office. At least most of us are. We're helpers. We're givers. So the more people we meet, we could, not necessarily, you might not need legislation, but we can help connect you with other people that we know or other organizations that we know, because we get to know a lot of people and organizations. So yeah, that's about all I have to add to that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that some folks come to us and they aren't sure what the resolution is, and they assume that formal resolution and the informative ordinance or legislation is that. But I found that, we as representatives and electeds have so many tools at our disposal, and often they're underutilized, particularly at a municipal level. So many of the committees and commissions and tools that we have are greatly underutilized, and maybe the ask is really about coalition building or connecting folks to specific boards or people with better expertise. I found that to be incredibly effective, and again, I think about helping people understand what the framework looks like for a municipal, local government or a statewide government, and then helping them understand what they want. Sometimes is the is the best route.
Great, thank
If
you.
I could add to that real quick,
Please.
two, they might come to us as a legislature, and it might be an issue we need to send them back to a city council or a county commission that might be able to help them better than we can.
Good point.
Great. That's really great information. Thank you, guys. Elice Hunley, you have a question in here. I want to invite you to turn your mic on and ask it.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Elice Hunley. I think that it can feel like lobbyists get the opportunity to take more of your time and attention than constituents do. And maybe their tone and intentions don't need to be as carefully curated as ours, or that they're just professionals at it and we aren't. And it's kind of intimidating, I guess. And so I think that my question is, how are your relationships with lobbyists different from your relationships with constituents?
I'll take that one first. I don't think they're any different. The lobbyist is more assertive. You said that maybe they're more comfortable with it. The lobbyist is there, they're there for a purpose, and they know what they're doing. And a constituent sometimes is intimidated by reaching out to us and figuring out what we need. But to me, I don't care if you're a registered lobbyist or a constituent, or even not my constituent. If you have a need and you reach out to me, or you just want to talk about something, my relationships are the same. I would say that it's different in the way that I'm approached by a lobbyist. They approach me in different ways. A lobbyist approaches me, direct, and they know what they have a certain purpose, and a constituent just wants to get to know me and get help with their specific issue. So that's my answer.
Mine would be, in some of the organizations I've been in the past, we have lobbyists that do that in Charleston. And one thing they've always told us, we are there, we're working, we're sponsored or paid for by you, but it's important that your representatives hear from their constituents. So a good lobbyist will use their membership or the people that's backing them to back up what they're saying to the legislatures. And that's very important. If you don't have a lobbyist who has a lot of people behind them saying, yeah, or people or get to know you saying, yeah, they represent us, that can throw up a red flag that it might not be on the up and up. So, and again, as we said earlier, we're asking other senators, other delegates, do you know these people? And that includes lobbyists also.
Rosemary, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't have a whole lot of scope of experience with lobbyists at a municipal level, more my community organizing experience. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that, you know, if I were ever approached by a lobbyist, the treatment or experience would be no different than, you know, how I speak in my relationships with constituents.
Great, thank you. Elice, that was a fantastic question. Thank you. As we round the corner into sort of the last moments of this discussion this morning, I do want to take a moment to just thank all of our wonderful panelists for taking an hour out of their day to be a part of this, and all of the emails that I bugged you with previously. I'm going to move into sort of a final closing question. So I've taken hundreds of farmers over the years to the Capitol, and they can just be so intimidated to walk under, walk under the Gold Dome, to schedule meetings, to attend meetings. And this is actually something, you know, everybody can watch me make my pitch. Senator, now that you're not going to be in office, I would love to talk to you about how we get more farmers to the Capitol, or involved in local policy making in the future. So we should touch base after this panel. But my question to you guys is, if you could make a statement to folks who are watching this, and they're intimidated about going to the Capitol, they're intimidated about going to a council meeting, they're intimidated about talking to an elected official, what statement would you make to them?
Who's going
People.
first?
We're people. We're just like you. I mean, obviously we have our differences, but I make my kids lunch while I'm in the middle of a panel thing. So, don't be intimidated. I pictured, even as after I got elected, I pictured like these really fancy offices and this really like plush gourmet everything. And it's not. I mean, I walked into my office. We all share an office in the house. So I walked into my office and I was like, gosh, this is it. It's all nasty furniture. It's nothing to be intimidated by, guys. Just give us a call and come on in.
I agree with the delegate. Don't be afraid of us. We're people too. And usually we're there to help you. And one thing different I will mention in the Senate that the House doesn't have, each senator has an assistant, which helps a lot with our schedules. So be sure to talk to that person, whoever they may be, as you're trying to see the senator. Make sure you get a good rapport with them. That helps as you move forward. And I saw something pop up on the screen and I'll mention it. Spencer, if she says, we need you to come today because this issue is very important, they're voting on it, be sure to do that. Make sure that you listen to those who lobby for you. And if they need you there, come and support them.
Completely agree. I think it's important for folks to remember, and I tell voters this all the time, you're the boss. You pay for our salaries, you pay for us to be in the seats we're in, and you should, you should feel comfortable, reaching out to us. Also, I think that as representatives, as elected officials, we have an obligation to break down those barriers and create spaces that are comfortable and accessible. I know it can be incredibly intimidating for folks who have never participated in their democracy before, never knocked on a representative's door, have never gone to the Capitol or to a council meeting. And I think that we have to recognize those barriers, those both physical sometimes and mental barriers, and try to make people feel as comfortable as possible reaching out to us.
Great.
If I may add real quick, Spencer, when you do come to talk to us, don't say, I want this, or I'm not going to vote for you. Don't be threatening to us. Get a good rapport. And even if we don't agree, we can still talk and get somewhere to go forward with.
Yeah, and so I was going to end on that question, but Amy Jo, she just put a really good question in the chat. If you guys will give us 2 more minutes, I'd like to address that question. Is that all right?
I'm good.
Amy Jo, do you want to turn your audio on and ask?
Sure. My name is Amy Jo, and I'm an organizer for Our Future West Virginia and a part of this Food for All coalition. My question is, based upon, I was thinking about the lobbyists and what Amanda had said about organizations inviting y'all to lunch. And I'm thinking, I never would have thought I could call you up and say, hi, my name is Amy Jo. I'm in your district. Can you come to lunch? So what, as a constituent, can we do to stay memorable in your mind? We don't have money, right? I organize poor folks. So we don't have money and we can't wine and dine you. So what can we do to make sure that you remember us after we meet?
I would say just be you. I mean, I don't know that you need to do anything special to be memorable. Just be you. And obviously, we aren't going to remember absolutely everyone we meet. I have a horrible memory. But if your issue is important and you're you, I think you're going to be memorable already.
I'll echo that. Be you, and also make sure we know the issue, because lots of times we can associate the face or the person with the issue. So that helps us as we move forward.
I think it's a great question. I know a lot of voters and constituents feel that they're at a disadvantage because they cannot wine and dine and take somebody to a golf course or do any of those, borderline, sometimes unethical things. But I think for me, I'm not, in the state house. I don't represent in state or federal office. But when somebody is able to share a personal story about how something has impacted them or affected them, either in a positive or a negative way, that sticks with us. We're human beings, we're focused on those things. And like the senator said, when we're able to tie that to a specific person, whether or not we ever pass ordinances or legislation, that is powerful and it sticks with us. So being able to, share a personal narrative and a story is always helpful. Great.
Great.
And I think it's important for me to note that I've paid for my own lunches when I have lunches with people. So you don't have to wine and dine us to get with you. And you could also invite us to coffee. I get invited to coffee often, but yeah, I wanted to say that.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for taking your time to be a part of this. I think it's been incredibly educational, and to something Rosemary said, breaking down sort of these mythical barriers between elected officials and constituents is really important. And I think you guys have made a huge step in doing that today. So thank you so much. This concludes this session. For folks who are following us all through the day, we're going to take a lunch break and we will be back at 1 p.m. talking about utilizing social media with Renee Alves from the from the West Virginia Center for Budget and Policy. Thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Spencer.
Bye, thanks.